Sustainability Management Association. And I do see that we have one of our board members on the call. Michelle Vicentin is our treasurer. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. And as we wait for a few more people to log on, we'll go ahead and just introduce you to the SMA. And if you can, please follow us on Sustainability Management Association on LinkedIn or Facebook. And we're at CertSMA on Twitter. And here's my email address as well if you would like to contact me directly. So just to give you a little bit about information about Sustainability Management Association, we're really motivated by teaching and building awareness on how to manage for sustainability and teaching students and professionals around the world about the simple, easy, low-hanging fruit that you can choose, but really the strategy that an organization needs to possess to really think about social responsibility, environmental management, and also managing your profit, all three in tandem. And really, we're very interested in helping people to develop their knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to manage sustainability in any type of organization, because it does apply to any job role as far as project management goes or something of that nature. And so we are a membership nonprofit, and we are also the accrediting body of a certification called Sustainability Management Certified Professionals. And I do see many of our SMCPs on the call, and thank you so much for joining us. And please track your time on this call so that we can qualify you for continuing education credits as well. So the continuing education credits, our certified professionals maintain 15 hours of continuous education, and the certification is offered to professionals who pass an exam and demonstrate that they have exposure to a body of knowledge. The certified professional tier is the higher tier for professionals who have 2 years of working knowledge within the field of sustainability management. So for instance, if you're an HR professional and you're developing wellness programs, benefit programs, and CSR aspects of your organization, that would qualify you, as well as a facilities manager who's managing safety and energy and water and hazardous waste material and so forth. Our certified associate tier, this is for students or professionals who are learning how to manage for sustainability or would like to maybe change their job role and go into this profession as a green job. Some of what's on the certification exam starts with strategy, an organization's vision about how they can manage their resources very well. And when we say resources, we're talking about human, natural, and financial resources, and to really ingrain that into your corporate culture and into the environment that you see and managing corporate social responsibility across the divisions that you might have, or as a business owner who's looking to really manage all three resources together. And so this just gives you an idea of what is the body of knowledge in the certification exam. And so our webpage is sustainabilityma.org. And again, you can email me directly if you'd like to receive more information. And we have a study guide for professionals and training available where you could take a course to prepare to take that online exam for the certification. Otherwise, we really invite you to join us as members or just follow us on LinkedIn and Kendall and Facebook. Here's our study guide on how to manage sustainability, and the questions for the certification actually come out of this study guide. So we're very much into Dr. Visser's proposal today to speak about innovation and design and bringing that through to your strategy. And we do believe that it's important for the professionals out there in business, utilities, government, or non-governmental organizations and nonprofits to be able to really think about how we can manage for sustainability. And some of our board of directors are on the call today. Michelle Vicentin is with us, and I believe George Barber is with us as well. And thank you so much for joining the call. And so we hope that through these webinars, we can teach people how to really focus on a healthy society and environment and economy, because we know that managing for the future is really important to do that so today, because if we can all get started, we can make a huge difference together. And so please join us. We're very interested in learning from you as well as you learning from us and sharing your ideas with each other as our membership grows. And so our upcoming webinars, we invite you to join us for those as well. The next one is for October 20th with Johnson Controls and Mesa MCOR. They'll be talking about innovative products for energy conservation. And then November 3rd will be our webinar from Emergy on flow battery storage technology. So we're super excited about the next two webinars that are coming up. And I thank you very much for joining the call today. And I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Wayne Visser, who is the author of Sustainable Frontiers. And he'll be talking to us today about being able to integrate innovation into your strategy. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the controls over to Dr. Visser, and welcome. Thank you so much for being our presenter today.
Thank you very much. Let me just put my screen on, and if you can confirm that you can see me.
I can,
and hear me.
You.
Great. Well, thank you for those who were able to join the call. I'll just go ahead and present some slides for about half an hour, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So this presentation, and indeed the book, is really about how we can integrate change into the sustainability agenda for business. A lot of my work over the last 25 years has been about trying to encourage and persuade, and in some cases to audit business on their sustainability. And it seems to me that we're not making progress fast enough or at the kind of scale that we need. And the main reason for that is because either we don't understand change or we're not managing the change process effectively enough. So what I'd like to just go through is to start by acknowledging that this is part of a journey that we've been on for a long time. And you could start by going back to when corporate social responsibility was really formalized. You could actually track that even back to the 1870s with Rockefeller, but in the modern sense to the 1960s. In the 1970s, we started to see business ethics come on stream and environmental management beginning to enter the practices of companies. The 1980s, we saw stakeholder theory first being coined by Ed Freeman, and quality management through the ISO 9000 series come online. 1990s, we saw corporate governance with first the Cadbury Code in the UK and then the King Code in South Africa and others around the world. And corporate sustainability with the triple bottom line, John Elkington introducing that in 1994. The 2000s has been more about corporate accountability, especially the reporting movement that has really taken off. The call for companies to be held accountable to prove it to the stakeholders that they really are responsible and sustainable. And I'd like to suggest that we're now in a different phase, which is all about shifting to value creation. But do notice that for all of these movements that have been kicking off since the 1960s, they're all like threads of DNA, strands which we don't actually lose. So the process just becomes more complex and more diverse. We don't let go of the old while we embrace the new. So I wanted to start this presentation really talking about value, because this is, to me, the heart of where the discussion should be today. So we could start by asking ourselves, do we create economic value? And most companies certainly would say, yes, of course we do. Most politicians would say, yes, of course we do. But if you look at the evidence, this is the change in GDP over the last 20 or so years. And what we see there is that, well, we do seem to create value, but then we have these cycles where we destroy a huge amount of value, as we have done in the global financial crisis 2008. And certainly in developed countries, you'll see those dark blue bars. We're actually creating very little value economically, even when the going is good. So we might say we do create value, but we also destroy it periodically. Here's the losses from the global financial crisis. So in trillions, $14.5 trillion of value wiped out just in those few years. Then we could ask ourselves, well, do we create human value? And here the picture seems to be more clear. Certainly in the last 25 years, we've seen the tackling of poverty at an unprecedented rate, so hundreds of millions of people coming out of poverty, and that surely is a good thing, and that is a quantification of human value creation. There is a caveat, though, because at the same time that we're pulling people out of poverty, we're increasing inequality. This has certainly been the case since the 1970s, where the gap between the rich and poor has got richer, has got bigger. And that's all around the world. It's not just in the rich countries. And so this is a real concern. We seem to have a model of capitalism that increases inequality, and therefore you could ask, are we really creating human value if it's a more unequal society? And we could ask the question, do we create natural value? And here, unfortunately, the answer is very clear, and the answer is no. We destroy natural value at a really depressingly unprecedented rate. Since 1970, we've lost 52% of the wildlife, the invertebrates on the planet. And so just in one generation, more than half of the life of the planet has been wiped out. You don't have to be a mathematician to see that you know, your grandchildren, for example, if this trend continues, really will not have the natural capital that we've enjoyed. This is not just about cute, fluffy animals. This is really about the ecosystems that support life on Earth. We can start to quantify that today. So the cost of our environmental impacts is starting to really mount up. These are different sectors, some research done by TrueCost. In utility sector, for example, $420 billion a year of environmental costs that are being imposed and not paid for by that sector. And so you could look at the various sectors and see that we're destroying a lot of natural or environmental value. So we do need to redefine value, and we could say that a start has been made by the integrated reporting framework, which at least starts to talk about 6 capitals: financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, and natural capital. And the challenge really is to start measuring these and to start managing business and our economies on the basis of whether they are creating or destroying value across these 6 capitals. Are we making progress? Well, certainly we're starting to see progress on measuring social value. So the idea of a social return on investment, this is just an example of one Mexican company, Los Alamos National Laboratory, where they've measured that they're creating $34 million worth of social return on investment through their volunteer hours, and through their investment in training and development, $20 million of social capital has been created. So we're beginning to make progress on valuing our social capital. What about environmental capital? Again, we're just starting to make progress there. You're probably familiar with the Puma case of the environmental profit and loss account. And you can see that they were able to quantify the environmental costs of a traditional cotton t-shirt, which came to 17% of the retail value. And then by redesigning the shirt to be biodegradable, recyclable, they were able to reduce that environmental cost to 12% of the retail value. I think one of the methodologies that takes this the furthest is a methodology by KPMG, where I used to work. I used to run their sustainability services in South Africa. And what you can see here is they start with the traditional measure of value, so economic value, revenue, cost, and earnings. But then they begin to add and subtract the social and the environmental value that is either created or destroyed. And they end up with a residual value, what they call true earnings. And I believe this is the way of the future. This is how all companies will be measured in future. This particular case is for a gold mine in South Africa. But here's the challenge for companies. These are the standards that companies have been asked to comply with since 1967, when the Organic standard first came out, the first eco-label. Now imagine you're a company and you're being confronted with this in the last few decades. You know, it's just overwhelming. The expectations of stakeholders are going up, and the capacity of companies to respond is really being challenged. So how do you make sense of this if you're a company? How do you comply with these standards in a way that doesn't put you out of business? Well, what we start to see is code convergence. I've just taken 4 here. ISO 26000, the OECD guidelines, GRI, and the UN Global Compact. And you can see that a large part of the requirements of these standards are actually the same. So we have a Pareto principle in operation here, where roughly 80% of all the standards have common elements, and then there are 20% where there is a variation for a particular sector or a particular issue of focus. So this is how companies have needed to start responding to this overwhelming proliferation of standards. And this gets to the heart of the value creation and the integration process for companies. And we have to acknowledge that this is not a new idea. There are lots of thought leaders who have been talking about and promoting value creation and integration all the way back to the 1980s with Ed Freeman, Paul Ekins, an economist, John Elkington, of course, Jed Emerson with blended value between social and financial value, C.K. Prahalad with bottom of the pyramid markets, Jonathan Porritt, 5 capitals model, Stuart Hart, who you're probably more familiar with his sustainable value, where he's looking at blended value between clean technology, bottom of the pyramid, pollution control, and so on. And most recently, Michael Porter and Mark Kramer with their creating shared value concept, which is really just the intersection of social value and economic value. So there is a great legacy of thought leadership on this idea of value creation and integration. The problem is that very few of them tell us how to integrate. They tell us that we should integrate, but in practice, how would you do that? Well, we're just starting to get some guidance on this. This year, there's a guidance document out from the ISO organization about the high-level structure of management systems. And they're starting to flesh out the common elements that all management systems should have, whether they're social, environmental, quality, health and safety, or energy management systems. And in particular, the areas where they fleshed out are on the context of the organization, which includes stakeholder needs and expectations, on leadership, and on opportunities and risks in the planning phase. So integration of management systems is one aspect of value creation and integration. Really where we're going to is, hello, I've just heard somebody come online. Is there a problem? I'm just getting some background noise, so perhaps we can get everyone on mute. So I'll continue unless there's a problem. So really, when we're talking about creating integrated value at the sustainable frontiers, there are 8 keys. And those are what I'm going to talk through very briefly with some examples. The first is to get to transformational leadership. And it's very interesting because I teach a lot of MBAs around the world, and many of them are still having this debate about whether a business exists to make profit. Is that the real purpose? Is it just about shareholder value? And this is a recent survey that was done just towards the end of last year, and it was done by Cranfield University, asking current and future leaders whether they believed business had a social purpose. And in fact, there's broad consensus, 88% and 90% of current and future leaders do believe that in addition to an economic purpose, companies have a social purpose. But then look at the generation gap that exists. 9 out of 10 current leaders think that their business is already delivering that social purpose, whereas only 2 out of 10 future leaders think that that's the case. So we've got a real change in expectations from the new generation who really don't believe that business is doing enough. We can take inspiration here from some of the founding forefathers of some of the biggest companies in the world. This is David Packard, co-founder of Hewlett Packard, saying, why are we here? I think many people assume wrongly that a company exists solely to make money. Money is important, part of a company's existence, but it's a result, not a cause. We have to go deeper and find the real reason for our being. That's both individually but also as companies. And so we've got to really question the heart of the company, the purpose of the corporation. Now, our work on transformational leadership at Cambridge University at the Institute for Sustainability Leadership suggests that the real transformational leaders embrace four basic strategies or actions. The first is that they're able to communicate blue skies, and what we mean by that is they can articulate a vision that people can get really inspired by. But on its own, a vision is not enough. They have to translate it then into big goals. We see this with the likes of Unilever, under Paul Polman, creating the goals of the Sustainable Living Plan that say they will double in size, halve their environmental footprint, and help 1 billion people out of poverty, all while making 100% of their sustainable products certified as sustainable. So we need those big goals to really inspire us as employees and as society. Then these transformational leaders tend to take the baby steps. They come up with pilot programs that actually demonstrate that it's possible to reach these big goals. And finally, they usually need a burning platform. They need something which is going to create urgency about the agenda that they're following on sustainability. If we look at the second key, then it's about enterprise reform, and I'm sure you'll all be aware of the B corporations, for benefit corporations in the US. You may be less familiar with community interest companies, which is the UK legal form for social enterprises, and two other US forms, the low profit limited liability company and the social purpose corporation. These are just important because they're beginning to question fiduciary duty, that it's not all about shareholders. It can be about a social purpose as well. And in fact, we can go back to a much older form, the cooperative movement, which has been around, depending on who you ask. The Scottish would say since the 1600s, the English would say since the 1700s, but for a long time. And some of the big cooperatives today are very sizable companies. Mondragon, coming out of Spain, has 74,000 employees and has revenues in excess of 12 billion euros. And today cooperatives employ more than 250 million people. So the traditional form of corporation is coming up for question. It's not the only way to go. Some of the innovators today, like the CEO of Zappos, are even experimenting with new ideas, like the idea of holacracy. And he describes this as not organizing people in a company according to hierarchy or seniority, but rather in terms of purpose. So people get together in teams where everyone is equal and pursue a particular goal, and then they might dissolve that team and form another team. So we're looking at different ways to reform our enterprises. Then on the innovation side, clearly technology has a role to play. And the real challenge here is to change the formula that has been true for the last 100 years. This is the rather famous IPAT formula of Paul Ehrlich that suggests that impact increases as population, affluence, and technology increases. It was Ray Anderson, founder of Interface, who suggested maybe we should be pursuing a different kind of goal where, in fact, technology reduces our impact rather than increases our impact and increases our happiness at the same time. We've just started to see that this is possible. If you look at the climate change mitigation patents that are being filed, they're growing at 24% as opposed to 6% for other technologies. And there are all kinds of exciting technologies and innovations coming online. The one in the picture here at the bottom is coming out of Stanford University. It's not only a flexible solar panel. It's what they call a peel and stick solar panel, so it's a bit like a post-it note that you can just stick wherever you need the energy source. This is another one that's actually coming out of the UK. It's MBA Polymers. They have plants here in Austria and in China. And what they've managed to solve is the problem of plastic waste coming out of the electronics and car industry, which is actually a nightmare to recycle. They now have plants where that plastic waste comes in, and not a single human hand touches the waste. It comes out the other end as these plastic pellets, which are of such high-grade quality that they simply go back into the production cycle for electronics and for motor vehicles. So some innovations that are transforming where we're going. The fourth key is corporate transparency, a case you're probably very familiar with, Patagonia, one of the real pioneers, coming out with the Footprint Chronicles. And what that really means is that as a consumer, you can get the information on, for example, this pair of organic jeans, how much waste was created, how much water did it use, how much carbon was emitted, and how far did it travel to get to me. That's a very different kind of reporting to GRI sustainability reporting once a year. They also have that strange campaign, don't buy this jacket, to say, look, we want to make the best and the most durable products, but if you get tired of them, why don't you just bring them back and we'll swap them out. We get companies like Nike, which has been, of course, criticized on many angles, but has been very progressive on the idea of closing the loop on production. And some of the research they did resulted in the Material Sustainability Index, where they can show which are the preferable materials to use from a sustainability point of view, whether it's silk or hemp or polyester or cotton. And they've turned that into an app called the Making app, which anybody can download and use in their production. And then we've got numerous other initiatives, platforms. The Good Guide, one again you should be familiar with in the US, where you can scan the barcode of a product and immediately get a rating on community, environment, and health. How Good is another one, how stuff is made, things.info. Things.info not only tells you where our products come from, but also where is the closest place to you that you could recycle them from. It's still under construction, but it's the sign of things to come. If we think about the fifth key, stakeholder engagement, then again, numerous initiatives that are really changing the game, even though stakeholder engagement itself is not new. We've got platforms like Boycott, Ethical Consumer that rates products in particular industries, and change.org, which is famous for its petitions. We've got others that focus on the supply chain. This is one called Supply Shift, where they pre-screen the suppliers on sustainability so that if you're engaging in a particular region or a sector, you can make sure that the suppliers you're using are the sustainable suppliers that are more preferable. And then we get platforms that are using crowdsourcing. So one also coming out of the US, out of California, is Convergence, that is using crowdsourcing technology to enable companies especially to engage with expert crowds, usually sustainability experts, to get feedback on sustainability reports or new policies or new initiatives that they want to test. Another one I'm working with is called WikiRate. It's being designed here in Europe, and that will be a wiki-type platform that will rate companies, where the public essentially, or the expert public, will be rating companies on sustainability elements. Social responsibility is still a key, even though it's not something that's new, because it's changing all the time. One of the changes we saw was with the ISO 26000 standard coming out in 2010. And for those that watch this space, it was extremely significant that now social responsibility covers 7 core subjects. So if you're only doing community involvement and development, which for many companies was how they saw CSR, that it's essentially just philanthropy or charity, you're no longer doing social responsibility. You're doing 1/7 of social responsibility. And this is the kind of message that we really need to get across around the world, especially in places like India, where they've mandated CSR, and what they really mean by that is philanthropy. We get companies that have gone on very challenging journeys on social responsibility. Nestle is one example. There were boycotts of Nestle in Africa dating back to the 1970s due to controversy around their infant milk formula, and more recently around their palm oil and deforestation in Indonesia. But they have responded. They've adopted the creating shared value approach of Michael Porter. And if you look at what they're really doing on the ground, they have oriented this whole strategy around nutrition, water, and rural development, and are investing an enormous amount in improving their performance across those 3 dimensions. What we really see, certainly when I travel and speak to companies, I've been fortunate enough now to travel to more than 70 countries, and I see that some companies are stuck in a defensive approach to social responsibility, where they think it's all about risk management and compliance. At the worst end of the spectrum, we get companies like Lehman Brothers that actually collapse as a result of their own greed. And we forget that those companies, Enron was the same, they had CSR initiatives, they had ethics officers, but it meant nothing because the culture of the company was so narrowly focused on financial and economic performance. Others, of course, are stuck in a charitable mode of social responsibility, believing that somehow it doesn't matter how they make their money so long as they give some away once they're filthy rich. And it's a bit like a cartoon I sometimes show where the CSR manager is sitting with his CEO, and his CEO says, yes, yes, giving back to the community is a fine idea. Just make sure you take a lot more out first. We really have to question that model of social responsibility where it's enough just to give charity. Not that there's anything wrong with charity. Then we get companies moving into the promotional phase where they realize the reputational benefits, and it becomes a lot about PR and marketing. There's nothing wrong with gaining that reputational dividend from doing sustainability and social responsibility, but we have to be careful that companies don't get stuck there, and certainly that they don't overpromise and underdeliver. Other companies like Coca-Cola moved beyond the promotional stage to the strategic approach. They did that after getting into trouble in India in the district of Kerala. They were accused of stealing the water. What they meant by that was draining the water supply, the water table. Doesn't matter if it was true, that was the perception. And so they made then water their strategic social responsibility goal, along with health issues, and are investing an enormous amount in dealing with those issues. But notice that they didn't change their strategy as a company. All they did was align an issue with their core business. All 4 of these, I believe, are approaches that are actually not solving the problems that we face. The trends get worse in the wrong direction across social and environmental issues, and that's why a lot of my work is calling for a transformative approach. This picture you see is actually of Kandalama, which is a hotel in the middle of a forest in Sri Lanka, and the whole hotel has been designed to have minimal impact on the environment and positive impact on the community. So, for example, there's 0 waste coming out of that hotel, and that's one example of a transformative approach. The 7th key really is what I call future fitness. This is to change the dialogue really from talking about sustainability and CSR to just talking about whether a company is fit for the future. I mean that in 2 ways. Does it fit into the future, which is rapidly changing, and is it agile to be able to adapt to a changing future? And through all my work over the last 25 years in this area, what I find is that there are 5 things that people can broadly agree on about the future, and that's that we want a future that is safe, is smart, by which I mean not only educated but better connected, that is sustainable, that is shared or equitable or fair, and that is satisfying, that is actually meaningful and supports our well-being. And if we start from that, then we can start to build a future consensus on how we move to a better future. Again, the example here of Unilever, that is really what I would call a future fit company, having their strategic goals in these three areas of health and well-being, environmental impact, and enhanced livelihoods. Or a company like Tesla, where I really think Elon Musk has created a future fit company. It's a company that, even though it has relatively small production today, is positioned in many different ways for the future, not only directly through Tesla Motors, but now Tesla Energy. He also chairs Solar City in the US, and one of the things he says is that the overall purpose of the company is to expedite the move from a mine and burn hydrocarbon economy towards a solar electric economy, which is the sustainable solution. We need companies that are really positioning themselves and being extremely competitive and profitable by positioning themselves for the future. The final key then to unlocking value at the sustainable frontier is integrated value. And really this is a methodology more than anything that says, how do we do this? If you want to integrate, how do you do it? And you've got to start by integrating your stakeholder assessment through a stakeholder materiality exercise. That then needs to feed into your strategic goals. I've just done an exercise, just come back from Singapore and done an exercise with a company there, and it's amazing how, even though they've done the stakeholder materiality assessment, which the Global Reporting Initiative more or less calls for now, it wasn't in any way linked to their strategic goals. So, that's when sustainability sits on the side rather than is embedded. From your strategic goals, you then track it through to your risk assessment, and that's across various of these issues. At the moment, we have different risk assessments for environment, for health and safety, for quality, for human rights, and we have to come up with common methodologies now so that we can compare and contrast those. You then take it through to the opportunity or the breakthrough analysis, and this is where you get the innovation. So you're looking at the processes that are typically linked to those strategic goals, and you're saying, how can we not only minimize the risks in those processes, but how can we find breakthrough solutions that could completely change the game here? And then finally, you put it all together so that you've got integrated management systems, and so that you don't have to have, multiple different audits. If you remember that slide I showed you with so many different standards. In fact, there are more than 450 sustainability standards around the world now, but you can rather have integrated audits as well. If you do all of that, then you do get business value. The business case is very strong. You reduce your costs by cutting out duplication, cutting resources and waste, and avoiding future liabilities. You reduce the audit fatigue because you can start to integrate those. Your employees get more motivated because they want to work for a company that they really believe in. Just to mention Unilever again as the example, they get 1.8 million people a year applying to that company because people see it as such a good company to work for. Customer satisfaction goes up because you're innovating on the products. Stakeholders feel more satisfied because you've actually listened to them and translated their concerns into strategic goals. And revenues can go up because your breakthrough analysis is pointing you in the direction of emerging sunrise technologies and industries. So I want to end really with a question to say, if we're talking about value creation, which is where I believe the sustainable frontier debate is today, we've got to really change this picture, which is the creation of short-term value. Some of you might recognize this chart. This comes actually from the 1972 Limits to Growth study, the first computer model of the world. And you can see that we do create short-term value up until round about 2020, 2030, when everything starts to come crashing down. What we need to convince our politicians, our business leaders, our civil society, our customers, is that we need to create long-term value. And it is actually possible to do that if we redesign our industrial system to make sure that we can have growth without having the incredible environmental impact that we're having today, and so that we can create social, natural, and economic value all at the same time. So my question to you, and then I'll look at what's been posted on the chat, is how do you want to create value in this space? I'm from Africa. I was born in Zimbabwe. There's a saying there that says there are two hungers, a lesser hunger and a greater hunger. The lesser hunger is for the things that sustain us, the roof over our head, water and food. But really the greater hunger is for an answer to the question why. Why are we here? What is our life for? And I'm one, certainly having spent all of my career in this space, who believes that the sustainability frontiers are a real pathway to creating value, both for ourselves, meaning in our own lives, but especially for our organizations and for the societies of which we're a part. So I'm going to end it there, and we'll open up to some discussions and some Q&A. The presentation is largely based on the book, which just came out at the end of June. And more information of the book is on sustainablefrontiers.net, including downloads of extracts of the book, as well as many reviews of the book. So thank you for your attention, and let's see what some of the questions are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Visser. I'm going to go ahead and unmute myself. If you might be in a location where you have some background noise, please do just unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question or to give some input. And I really like the way that we started off with a discussion about two types of hunger that, you know, there's people when they see an emergency happening, you know, we take action right away. And because this change is so slow with climate change and the way that we're using our resources much faster than the carrying capacity of the planet, how we see a slighter hunger in most nations where we don't actually feel that hunger ourselves in many westernized nations. And so, you know, I really like how you said that it really relates to so much that all of us are trying to solve, is that, you know, this is a slow moving problem, that you don't see a catastrophe happening and therefore there is a lack of action. I kind of wanted to know what our audience thinks of that as well. Would you like me to unmute you, or would you rather type into the chat box? Well, one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about was I liked the methodology that you created for future fitness. When we're talking about CSR being far beyond philanthropy, and for organizations to really implement a CSR program that is pervaded throughout the environment of that organization and throughout their supply chain, that there's where you see safety and smart and being able to really see what other organizations cannot, as far as the opportunities that exist to understand what our impacts are on the current state and what those future states will look like if we continue business as normal. So I really liked the safe, smart, sustainable, and shared and satisfying. And, you know, I often talk to many people within shared supply chains to really talk about integration and how to work together to solve solutions. So are you seeing the same type of effort in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, let me say a few things. Firstly, about what you raised on, you know, the idea of whether people feel that hunger, not the literal hunger, but actually the hunger to make a difference. I'm going to just post in the chat here a formula which was created by David Beckard. And it's actually a formula for change that says for any change to happen, the resistance to change must be less than the vision times dissatisfaction with the status quo times first steps. And I often think that in this space of sustainability, the one that really, causes us the most difficulty is D. I think in many parts of the world, people are actually not dissatisfied with the status quo. If you're in a rich nation, then you think that everything's okay, right? You've got a high quality of life. You certainly don't want to give up anything. And you don't see those big crises like climate change really hitting you unless you happen to be in Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina hits. And then in emerging economies, actually things are getting better for them. They're rising out of poverty. And so for them as well, they're not dissatisfied with the status quo because they see improvement. So I think that's a real challenge for us, is how do we convey the urgency of the problem without scaremongering, because that's been a very ineffective way to create change. And so I'm a great believer in needing to showcase what's possible to actually inspire people to change rather than try and frighten them into change.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's much more effective than shaming people into change. That's what our organization is about. Sustainability Management Association is for people that really want to be able to inspire and motivate others to see what's possible, because there's so much that you can do. I mean, this one property manager that we were working with, just to reorganize their garbage and to ask the residents to start recycling, it saved them $1.2 million a year just in this one property. And that's a repetitive savings that they're going to have that's going to be annual. And so just the small things matter, just one tiny little change to motivate others to see, well, if that's possible, what else is possible?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the business case has been getting stronger and stronger. It's certainly much stronger than it was 25 years ago when I started, because, policies got stronger, consumer awareness has got higher, technology's improved. But I have to say that we also have to be honest with companies, and my opening message is always that currently we are failing. I mean, we do need to acknowledge that. If you look at any of the statistics, whether it's biodiversity loss or carbon in the atmosphere or corruption or the gap between rich and poor, these things have not been turned around by all of our sustainability efforts over the last 25 years. So it's not enough for companies to pat themselves on the back and say they're doing a good job. So what we need to champion and to celebrate are those companies that are really being transformative, that are setting those ambitious goals like the net zero, net positive movement,
I
that is actually,
agree. Right. And
companies
zero
going
waste.
for zero waste, zero human rights infractions, net zero energy or zero or positive energy, on water as well, water neutrality as an example. So, it's a tricky communication challenge that we've got. But the exciting thing is I could never have written this book probably even 5 years ago, because there weren't enough of those transformational cases out there. And today there are. So in a way we've got no excuse. We've had the pioneers, and now we need to scale and to mainstream.
Yes, and I really like the word choices that you're using, because I do consider these businesses to be pioneers. There was a lot of experimentation going on, and really it is transformative leadership. And I have a very interesting question for you from Raymond Randall. And the question is, what is your opinion on the role of government, if any, in creating a business environment that incentivizes sustainable pursuits and growth? Does government lead business through policy, or does business lead government by example? What do you think about that? Would you like me to read it to you one more time?
Yes. No, I get the question, and it's a critical one. I'm one of the advocates of needing a stronger, clearer, more effective government role in this space. I actually think that we've experimented in the last 40 years, since the 1970s, with deregulation, and it's been a disaster. I mean, it is actually not worked. We've had voluntary action by companies, sometimes very defensively, and it's created some improvements, but it hasn't really got to the heart of the problems that we face. So I think that government actually has to take a stronger position on many of these things, but I need to qualify that and say in what way. What we don't want is what India is doing, which is to say you mandate CSR or sustainability and you tell companies that they must spend 2% of their pre-tax profits on sustainability or on CSR, because that's just, reinforcing philanthropy. It's just another kind of tax. What you want to do is have policy that sets the really bold targets for the society and for the economy, and then leaves business to innovate its way to reach those targets. And we have a very good example here in Europe. Through Cambridge University, we were facilitators in something called the Corporate Leaders Group on Climate Change. And what we found was that there was a catch-22 here where companies were saying they couldn't be bold because the policy horizons on climate change were not clear. There were no targets. It wasn't sure what governments were going to legislate. And the governments were saying, well, they couldn't do bold policy on climate change because they expected that companies would lobby against it, which has been the track record. And so we facilitated this dialogue, almost like shuttle diplomacy, between the government and the CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world. And we sort of said, well, what public messages do you need to put out as business to give government the political space to be bold? And then we said to government, we said to companies, what messages do you need from government in order to be bold in your investments? And this was actually very effective. So we ended up with probably the strongest climate legislation in the world, here in the UK first and then in Europe. To answer also your question directly, do governments lead, though? The experience is that they don't, they follow, which means that we need to have, oops, am I still here? Yes. We need to have companies that are pioneers. I think we lost people for just a second, or you lost me, but I'm back. So we need the pioneers to go ahead of the law and to show governments what's possible, and then we need the governments to step in and make that the new standard so that they can scale across all of the industries and effectively raise the bar.
Yes, you're still with us, no worries. And what do you all think about that? Because this is really a controversial topic about what is government's role and should business be pushing government along? And especially here in California, we in the United States, pretty much the federal government will follow whatever California state regulators are actually implementing. And so we've been going through that over the last 10 years or so, with very heavy regulations in almost all industries that impact energy and pollution. Um, what's really not heavily regulated is our water system, and we have such a keen opportunity to be able to think about how do we manage water for the future, so that when we do have these situations, how can we work together as a society within our government and business leaders to be able to come up with really great solutions. And so we're just moving very slowly in this realm. And so what a great question, Raymond. I really appreciate that. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Visser, or any thoughts about what you learned today?
Perhaps while you take those, I mean, the water issue is crazy, right? I mean, how bad does it have to get in California? I saw the same in Australia, by the way. Where they had 10 years of drought, and still people talk, in climate denial or not wanting bold policy on that. So, that really is, a lot of my work is on leadership, and this is the role of leadership. Leadership means you take people where they may not have gone, on their own, because you can see a little bit further, or you're a little bit braver, or you act in the common interest when most people are acting just in their own self-interest, and we get the tragedy of the commons. So, I think politically and in business terms, one of the biggest crises we face is leadership, and that's what's going to make the difference. I sometimes say that the difference between a future fit or a transformative sustainable company and the rest is two things. One is admission and the other is ambition. So are the leaders of these companies or even the governments prepared to admit that we have a problem and that they are part of the problem? In fact, our whole industrial system is part of the problem, the way that we've designed it. Like Ray Anderson used to say, the founder of Interface, we are all plunderers, and one day we'll all go to jail for what we do if we act this way. So admission is a really big one and a difficult one for companies to realize that the system they're part of and they're perpetuating is broken. It really is not working for long-term value creation. But then the second part is ambition. So are they prepared to set those BHAGs, those big, hairy, audacious goals? Because what we've seen is only when we do that do we get the real innovation. And only when we get the innovation do we really start to solve the problems that we have, instead of the incremental approach that allows people to feel good while the problems get worse. So I seem to have lost audio.
I'm sorry, Dr. Visser. I just completely forgot to unmute myself and I was talking away, so please forgive me. I just wanted to say thank you very much for this presentation. I really actually learned some new terminology today from you, and I appreciate that quite a bit. But I wanted to sincerely say a big thank you for forming the CSR International. It was a pivotal time when that organization was starting up and gaining traction, so that many of us really sat back and asked ourselves, what is it that we contribute that's valuable to society and to our stakeholders? And to really give that some heavy thought as to how do we manage CSR moving forward in the future, and how can we really plan for that within our organizational vision and completely ingrain it into strategy. And so I just wanted to thank you for all of your efforts and for the ways that you have inspired many people around the world. And thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And for organizations like yours, this is where the rubber hits the road. The hard part is actually doing it. And, people always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist in this area. And I always say if I look at the facts and the trends, then it's hard not to be pessimistic. But if I look at the people and the organizations that are really working to change the system, then I cannot be but an optimist. So today, spending some time with you, I'm an optimist.
Well said, and you make me feel optimistic too, and I hope the rest of our audience as well. So thank you very much, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us and perhaps join some of our webinars and keep following us, and we really appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you for joining the call, everyone, and I'll be sending you out the webinar a bit later when I download the recording, and we'll see you next month. Next webinar is October 20th on energy conservation technology. So have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.